Well, welcome again, everyone. We are so thankful you're here today. If you're in the middle of introducing yourself in the Zoom chat, please feel free to do so. But it is 12:02, probably almost 12:03, so we'll go ahead and kick everything off today. So again, please introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't done so, but we'll go ahead and introduce who we are on the other side of the camera to get everything kicked off. So hi, everybody. If we have not met, my name is Erin Cook. You can tweet at me, with me, to me, at Erin K. Cook. My background is in upper elementary education, coaching, and special ed as well. With InnerOrbit and our sister site Rocketlit, I support educators through their use of our site and through their science journeys together, which has been so humbling this school year as well, just seeing all of the educators just really just kill it this school year, which has been great. And as far as my own personal self-care, I feel like I've gotten a little bit into reading fiction again, which is great. I feel like for so long, it kind of just got pushed to the side and I was doing different master's classes and things like that, so I didn't have time for it. So literally this year, I'd be like, okay, I can make it through my day if I know like at 9:30 at night, I have 30 minutes to read this fiction book. So that was definitely a way for me to keep going through this school year. And this is my colleague, Brendan.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Brendan Finch. I taught middle and high school science for 7 years. If you want to tweet at me, you can hit me up at BirdbrainFinch. I wrote a lot of the content on Rocketlit and almost all of the assessments on InnerOrbit. So really, really excited to share what we just finished building because it's pretty cool. And yeah, I think it'll be helpful for y'all. My go-to is reading fiction. I've gotten really into these fantasy, like Lord of the Rings-esque. Brandon Sanderson is this author, and I'm just like super geeking out on this like stuff. But exercise is my absolute go-to. I feel like a puppy in many ways, where I have so much energy that if I don't exercise, I can't even, like I just can't sit still. So exercise is soothing and also maybe just like an actual necessity for me as like a as like a person. But I'm really excited to chat with you about what we're doing today. So InnerOrbit is our platform, and I know that many of y'all know what it is because you've been to one of these sessions and we've talked to you individually many times in some cases. But what we do are we find phenomena and we write clusters of questions around them. We write really thoughtful questions that scaffold up from student prior knowledge to on grade level knowledge. And the goal is really to just build a picture of the complexity of student progress towards the NGSS. Are they understanding content? Are they understanding what they need to know to make sense of a new phenomena? We don't want teachers to have to search for phenomena, and we don't want teachers to have to write questions for these. So we spend a lot of time really thoughtfully doing that. And then with that, we pull a ton of data out of that because the questions are so thoughtfully written. So you get these beautiful reports. This is like the sort of like math and ELA type of love that they get, where you can look at a specific standard and break down the elements within 3.5 or 6.8 or 9.12 that were covered, and start to figure out where students have strengths and where we have work to do to make sure that all students are being successful, and teachers are also reflecting upon their practice, and administrators are able to make curricular decisions that are awesome and move the needle for everyone. So really, really excited to share that with y'all today.
So speaking of sharing with you guys today, we have a lot of really great things to talk about today on our agenda in our short webinar. So we're first going to just start off with some 2020-2021 school year reflections, just to kind of give you a sneak peek of how our team has been supporting educators this school year and kind of where our stance has been moving forward. Then we're going to dive into InnerOrbit just to give you guys an overview if you're new to the site, or even if you're familiar with the site, maybe highlight some features and details in our assessments and reports that maybe you didn't know about. But all of that really to inform how we can use assessment to end this school year and intentionally plan for things moving forward. So we'll kind of talk about how we've been supporting educators with assessments, specifically NGSS 3-dimensional assessments, and how that can help them move forward with our inventories. So we are so excited that we're releasing these specialized assessments for you all. And we're going to unpack those inventories, how they were created, what types we have, what are different ways you can use them in your context and such. And then we'll end our time with some recommended next steps of how you guys can move forward and then use these resources in your classroom. So we are so excited to be chatting with you all about all of this today. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to put them in the Zoom chat, and either Brendan or I will get to them as we go. And then we'll also put a link to our calendar in the chat as well. So as we're chatting, and if you want to really talk about these specific inventories in your context, or really any NGSS assessments that we offer on our site, feel free to make a time with us. Like that's probably the highlights of our day is talking with educators about InnerOrbit in their context. So feel free to make a time on the calendar as we go as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick off our time with some 2021 school year reflections. And we understand that this school year, this might have felt like a bowling ball, like swinging away and then kind of coming dangerously close to your face. And it's just been a crazy school year. But we also want to celebrate that students and educators have been adaptive and learning new skills and learning new things that they might not have ever learned if it was just a normal school year. And that is something to celebrate. We also know too that teaching from strengths is kind of where our heartbeat is at InnerOrbit, both Brenda and I being former classroom educators. We know that all students have understanding and skills and knowledge that can be built upon to explore new science contexts. And we really want to celebrate the strengths of students and educators coming from this school year. We also know kind of on the flip side of that coin that there is kind of some tension rumbling in different schools and districts about this idea of learning loss, which we still want to celebrate students' strengths and what they've learned. We also know we have pacing guides and standards and state tests and things to cover to make sure that we're on pace in our programs. So we want to best be able to speak to that learning loss and support you all with data, because we know that informed students and educators are empowered students and educators. Knowing where to make your curricular map or what to focus on helps us to be empowered to best meet the needs of our students. So we believe at InnerOrbit with our NGSS assessments that we're actually perfectly poised to make this happen. And here's a couple quick reasons why. So first, all of our assessments are phenomena-based real-world situations. So this is actually one phenomena that we're going to unpack in just a little bit around tuskless elephants. But all of our phenomena are exciting, actual, real events that are either beautiful or gross or interesting. So kiddos are really engaged in their assessment work. And all of our questions are poised as sense-making questions. So they're pointing back to the phenomena for students to make sense of this novel situation using all of the dimensions of the NGSS. And speaking of all of the dimensions of the NGSS, we specifically tag and write our questions not only to each dimension, but also to the grade band, to the element of that specific standard. So all of our questions are tagged and crafted with that in mind, which lead to really detailed reports. So we're excited in just a little bit too to demo some of those reports to you and kind of think through how we can use them for this idea of end of year inventories. Also, inventories aside, well, actually inventories is a great example of this, is that we create kind of pre-packaged assessments for educators just to plug and play wherever they feel best in their curriculum. So we already have diagnostic, formative, summative assessments that you can search by phenomena and performance expectation to build a unit of assessments that are just ready to go for your students in your classroom. So we're excited to add inventories onto this list as this kind of like ultimate summative assessment for the end of the school year to then best plan forward, which is great. And then lastly, if you're new to InnerOrbit, we're trying as hard as we can to make the tech lift as minimal as possible. And specifically, we have Google Classroom roster integrations, Clever, and at codes. So we have all of these different avenues for you to get students onto InnerOrbit, take our beautiful assessments, and collect some really rich data. So what we're going to do now is we're going to deeply dive into our assessments and reports, and Brendan's going to walk us through all of that. So as we do that, I want you to kind of keep in mind what designs and features do our sites have that are particularly going to lend themselves to these end of year inventories, because that's what we'll talk about after that. So take it away, my friend.
All right, let's do this. So we're going to talk about tusklessness in elephants. So if you're not familiar with this, so tusklessness is a trait in elephants, and typically it represents a very small part of the population of African elephants. They're just born without tusks, and it's a heritable trait. But in certain areas, there have been strong selective pressures for or against elephants that have tusks. Meaning, if you have a tusk, it is likely that somebody is going to come take that tusk from you, and also your ability to reproduce. Which means that in Mozambique and Tanzania, particularly in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of elephants that had tusks that were no longer able to reproduce and pass on their genes. So this is an example of something that's actually happened in the real world. And our goal within our orbit is that you give your students, adaptation lessons. You're going through a unit, maybe you have a beautiful storyline, some really cool stuff you're going through. And then in order to test whether they can, apply that knowledge and make sense of something, so do the things that scientists and engineers are supposed to be doing, we have a novel phenomena, so tusklessness in elephants and the frequency of that trait in various geographies in Africa. And so with that phenomena, we'll give students a little bit of background, have a little picture of a adorable little baby elephant running across the road, because, why not? And then we'll write a bunch of questions that go along with that. So for the assessments that we're kind of unveiling today, these end of year inventories, we've grouped a bunch of these questions together, but there are a lot more that go along with each phenomenon. I think this one has like 13 questions that go along with it. So some of the questions very, very deliberately will only assess prior knowledge. So as a former middle school teacher, I can say my students came into my classroom sometimes with like this much background knowledge in science. And that's a bummer, because I need to bring them up from understanding nothing about adaptation to, to being ready for high school biology, which is a lot to do. So we have questions on here that deliberately and explicitly assess third grade elements of the adaptation DCI. And that's really important, because you can give those at the beginning of the unit, figure out, are we even on the same page with this? Do I need to start talking about that? Or can I move on to the rest of that? So all of our clusters will include these prior knowledge questions, and then we'll also have other scaffolded questions in addition to that. So the prior knowledge is where they start, and then we'll have robust multiple choice questions. So some of these will be 2-dimensional, some of them will be 3-dimensional. Oftentimes, in this case, it's using mathematics and computational thinking. Students need to talk about the frequency of tusklessness. They need to analyze data and figure out what's changing with the frequency, and why is it changing? How does that relate back to adaptation and natural selection and all that good stuff, or artificial selection in this case. But that the goal is that these questions are what students will be taking on a standardized test, and they are rigorous. Students have to refer back to the phenomena. They need to make sense of it. They should have some background knowledge on, just how traits are graphically represented. They should have some background knowledge on adaptation, and then they need to make sense of the information that we give them. And then beyond that, we have what I like to call the does what it says on the can. So the NGSS standard says that students need to explain how, such and such impacts the adaptation or the characteristics of species over time. And that's what this is. So there'll be a free response question at the very, very end, and that asks students to do the thing the standard says to do. So students will be using mathematics, talking about frequency or percentages, change over time of these traits, talking about adaptation, and talking about cause and effect. And those are all the 3 elements in there. So all this just to say that we put an enormous amount of thought into how we write these assessment items so that you don't have to. And we have folks that are using these, especially the robust multiple choice and the summative free response questions, as benchmark questions. So a lot of our folks at the district level will go in and they'll build a 20-question assessment for Q1 or Q2, and that will be their benchmark for that quarter, which is fantastic, because if you're doing that right now on your own, it probably takes you days to do, and you could probably knock it out in about 15 minutes on our site. Cool. And then after we have all these beautiful questions and they're tagged very discreetly and specifically, we can give you reports on things that are helpful and useful for you. So if you're having a conference with an individual student, you can pull up this report and say, okay, I see that these are the elements of developing use models you're being really successful with. So we can lean into those, but here are some areas where we need to put a little bit of a, like extra oomph into to move you up. If you're a group of teachers sitting down with a PLC, you can look at this performance expectation report and say, okay, we tried to cover MSPS 3.1. Let's look at what elements we covered. Okay, I can see that there are a couple elements in 3.5 that we struggled with, and then some elements in 6.8. So that means that we need to talk about that background knowledge first in any remediation courses and in any plan that we have to make sure students are, meeting their goals. And then in addition, as a district, so if you're looking at these reports from a high level, you can see all this data in aggregate in our school report. So obviously a group of teachers can do this too, but if you're overseeing teachers as a coach or some sort of instructional lead, then you have this beautiful report. What we're looking at right here is analyzing and interpreting data, and we're looking at all of the elements in 3.5. So this is from an appendix of the NGSS standards. And it breaks down specific skills students should have in 3.5 and specific skills in 6.8. And the goal here is that what students are really strong at in terms of analyzing interpreting data discretely. So are they struggling with representing data? Are they struggling with making sense of phenomena? Are they struggling with causal and correlation relationships? Each of these are discrete and specific skills, and each question is tagged with one of these things. So the goal really is that you can look at this data at the end of a unit or a benchmark or a summative assessment, or even just like little formative assessments that are given. You can move on. Daisy, if green means good to go, what does yellow mean? So you can actually change the colors and the percentages that are tagged in here. So you're able to make edits to that. So if you consider proficient to be 70% or 65%, which candidly, with the level of complexity and rigor of these assessments, 65 or 70% would be awesome. Students would be doing very, very well. We expect them to struggle. So yellow would be, is approaching expectations. So you can alter that on this report, and I can show that later if you're interested in it. But the goal is that you could manipulate, what those colors are to say, okay, this is, where I think students need to be, or where they are. And then that reteach, so the red would be, these are areas where students struggled more than what we would want them to be achieving. Daisy, does that answer your question? Go ahead. Obviously, I'm watching the chat, so if you do have questions, please answer them there. Yep. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Daisy. Good question. Cool. So now I'm going to kick it back to Erin, so we can talk a little bit more about what the uses for these inventories are. And I just want to be explicit that today we're talking about these really specific assessments, these inventories that we've released, but all of this data is available for all of our assessments. So whether you're a teacher building small formative assessments, or if you're using these end of year inventories, these are, this is the data that you're collecting within InnerOrbit all the time.
Awesome. So now that we had a little bit of reflection from the school year and kind of what our stance has been supporting educators, and now you know a little bit more about InnerOrbit, kind of have all of that in mind, let's specifically bring those two things together to talk about how can an NGSS inventory help moving forward. So as we mentioned at the beginning, if you believe in strength-based instruction, which I know our educators do, if you don't know your students' strengths, how are you best able to get strength-based instruction? So being able to look at our data to actually see where students are excelling, so then you can maybe not spend as much time on that, because we also know time and resources in your classroom are important. And you can also use those skills and understandings that students already have to then use and grow them a little bit more. So data can inform building the strengths-based instruction. It also helps you get a specific intentional focus and goals for either yourself in your own classroom or your entire school. And all of that really feeds into making sure that your time and resources are well spent. Brenda and I, both being former educators, we know that crunch of pacing and making sure students are understanding. So if you're using our data to best design your instruction and kind of being nimble as you go, your time and resources will be better spent on what you specifically need to focus on with your kiddos or remediate as well. Specifically too, we're helping a lot of our educators with their summer programming. I'm a huge fan of summer programs. I definitely did them when I was still in the classroom as well. I also know they go by in a blink of an eye. They're always so quickly started and then ending really quickly too. So if you can use our data to help best design your summer programs, to decide what curriculum or lessons you want to teach based upon what gaps you might see, that might be helpful as well using these inventories right now. And then specifically, if you gather these inventories now in Q4 and near the end of the school year, you can spend some time in the data with your instructional team and decide on best goals for the next school year as well. Because we know that moving into the next school year, some things might be shifted and adjusted to support, what happened this school year. So our data can really lead into that, and that's what these inventories will be poised to do as well. And specifically, looking at our school report here, we've been talking with a lot of our educators too about, even at the classroom level, if you're giving these inventories right now, you're giving the best gift possible to the next science teacher. So if you're able to capture this data, maybe as a 7th grade teacher, and then the 8th grade teacher uses our site and can see the data next school year, before the students even walk into your classroom, you can see how they're progressing specifically on the SCPs and cross-cutting concepts that you might be addressing as well. That would kind of be like the best gift possible to the next teacher moving up. So we really think our inventories can not only help, plan your summer programming, plan out your next school year, but specifically at the classroom level too, just having educators be informed about, where to start with different groups of students is really helpful too. So without further ado, let's really dive into our inventories. So what we're going to do is kind of talk to you about the ones that we've already created. We have some guidelines and recommendations, as well as some options about how we kind of imagine these best being used in different contexts as well. So first, we've created our inventories by grade band and subject, and you can kind of use whichever feels best for your context. So for our fifth grade friends, we've created just one inventory that covers earth, life, and physical science in one fell swoop. Then for our middle school friends, we've created 3 just by subject by the 6-8 grade band of the NGSS standards as well. So if you're wanting a cumulative 6-8 on one specific subject inventory, we have those for you. In addition, we also have 3 integrated inventories as well based upon the California integrated framework. If you have a different integration for middle school, have no fear. We have a plan for you. So if you're not in California and you have a different integrated model, we have a plan because we know different people integrate the standards in different ways. So hold tight, we have a plan for you as well. And then for our high school comrades, we have, again, by subject, and again, also 2 by the integrated models as well. So you can kind of use whichever structure feels best for you to gather data for your specific grade band and subject. So some guidelines and recommendations that we have for people to use these inventories in their context is first that we try to create these inventories to be as approachable and as least of a barrier for students and teachers as possible. So all of our inventories are just 15 to 30 questions. You know, as you can assume, the 5th grade one is 15 questions, and as you move up to the high school one, it's going to be closer to the 30. And then also with these inventories, we chose multiple choice, those rigorous multiple choice questions Brendan just showed you as much as possible to lift the burden of grading. There are some performance expectations where it was just not possible that we had to have open-ended questions. So you'll see a couple of those sprinkled throughout, and you can choose to keep them or not as well. Additionally, with these inventories, we chose maybe 1 to 2 questions per performance expectation, again, just to make these inventories as accessible as possible for time and students as well. So if you are implementing these inventories, some recommendations we have is if you're figuring out the timing of how long should students work on them, we're thinking about 3 minutes per question is what we've been found and heard from our educators to be kind of a nice pace and cadence. That gives students enough time to experience the phenomena, look through the resources, and then be able to make sense of the questions given. Additionally, if you use Google Chrome, the 2 extensions, Google Translate and Google Read and Write, work beautifully on our site and really increase the access for students to be able to understand what the phenomena and the questions are asking them to do. So we definitely recommend those. And in just a moment, we're going to tell you how you can modify some questions as well. So as you're going through these inventories, and if you want to change out some vocabulary or if you phrase the questions a different way, we really recommend you being able to modify the questions to best meet the needs of what your students are, have experienced this year. And then you can also remove questions. So if you've only maybe gone through 2/3 of those performance expectations and don't necessarily want to go through all of them, you can also remove some questions from these pre-made inventories as well to more specifically design them for what you need to be. So let's now really talk about these inventories and 3 options of what it could look like in your context. So I'm going to preview them really quickly, and then Brendan's going to demo the site for us and walk through what each of these options will look like actually on our site. So the first option for you all for our end of year inventories is to just use them as is. So if your bandwidth is really taken up, maybe you just moved into hybrid teaching or in-person learning, and there's all these other things juggling in the air right now, feel free to just use our inventories as written, and you'll still collect a lot of amazing data. So feel free to use them just as they are ready to go. The second option, which is maybe if you're in the integrated model that I mentioned before, is you can create your own inventory using our bank of really rigorous multiple choice and then even summative questions as well. So Brenda's going to show you how you can specifically, if you know what standards you want to assess, how you can build that assessment pretty quickly on our site. And then the third option, which is my favorite option, because that means we get to meet you all. If you'd love to make a time with us to talk about these inventories or really just NGS assessment in your context, our calendar is in the chat. Thank you so much, Brendan, for putting that in there. And we'd love to meet with you to help design these inventories with you on the call or even pre-make them, and then we can talk about them together during our meeting. So again, feel free to make a meeting with us, and then we can help you make those inventories. So now I'm going to pass the screen sharing baton onto Brendan virtually, and he's going to demo each of these options for us on InnerOrbit.
allow me to unmute myself. So we'll go through option number one first, and then we'll start to talk about the other options. So option number one is that you just use the inventories as we have them. So on the site, if you log into InnerOrbit, you can click Get Started, and you'll have a whole bunch of buttons up here to browse. So the first thing I want to call out is that usually we just have this 5th grade, middle school, and high school. We're actually writing grades 3 and 4 right now. So we're going to have 3 through 12 up here later on. I'm really excited about that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about inventories. So we're going to go ahead and hit the bullseye right here, and a whole bunch of inventories are going to pop up. So you'll want to look for high school, HS, or 8th grade, or middle school. And when you click into one of these inventories, you're going to see a whole bunch of real juicy assessment items. So as you scroll down, all of the questions are, all grouped together, a few questions per phenomena, and there's lots and lots of really cool phenomena. If you want to see what it looks like from the student view, you can click Preview Assessment, and that'll show you what it looks like from the student view. So they go through, answer questions, cool. We switch between different phenomena, oh neat, and you got lots of good stuff in there, cool. If you like the questions and you want to use them all, you're going to click Use All Questions up here, and that's going to put them all into an assessment. And you got this cool assessment here. As you go through the questions, there's a couple things you can do. So let's say you are not going to do any free response questions. Nope, no sorry, Bob. So I'm going to go ahead and click Remove Questions. I can take those out, as many as I want. Maybe you're only looking for something that's 10 questions to sum up all of high school physics. Good luck, but you're able to remove as many questions as you'd like. Let's say as you go through these, you also don't like the way a question is worded. So you can go ahead and click Modify Question and change either the number of answer choices. You can change the text of the questions, frankly, anything you want to make the questions what you need them to be, and then click Add to Quiz, and it'll replace the question. You're not modifying the core question on our site. You're more just making a copy and saving that into your assessment. But the goal here is that you've got tons and tons of content in there for, to assess where students were at this school year. Okay, so let's say you look through the inventories, or you teach in a state where they use totally different standards than the NGSS, but you absolutely want to create an inventory and figure out where students are at. So what you're going to do is you're going to search for performance expectations or for DCIs. So if there's content you're looking for, you can type in DCI, click on Structure and Properties Matter, and you're going to have a whole bunch of assessments pop up. So at the very top, because structure and properties of matter aligns with high school, the integrated and chemistry and the 7th grade, you're going to see those assessments in there. But if you scroll down, you're going to see a bunch of our pre-made assessments, and you can choose any questions you'd like from these, or down to all of our phenomena and clusters. So you can click into any of those and choose questions that you like from here and add them to a quiz. So we'll go through, add a couple questions from this. Maybe we'll talk about modeling ammonia hydroxide and add a couple questions here and go on through. And I can choose multiple phenomena, or let's see, HSPS17, and choose multiple different assessments and assessment items to pop in here. So why does steel wool get heavier when burned? I don't know. Do you know? I know. So you can click Add to Quiz and put those in there. Again, you can modify questions if you'd like, change it to whatever you want, and you got your assessment. Cool. So that's option 1, and then option 2. So you can build them on your own. And I do want to pause right here just to answer questions that pop up. Alicia says, are the inventory questions different from the questions currently in your item banks? Awesome question. And so Aaron already answered it, but I'll just talk about it. So these are the rigorous, robust multiple choice questions or free response questions that meet the standards that we're looking to assess. So we have questions on all of our phenomena that will go from background knowledge, really simple questioning, to the complex 3-dimensional questions. So what we've done here is we've filtered through all the standards in each of these instructional frameworks and lists of standards, and then only included 1 or 2 questions, in few cases 3, from each of those standards that are the most robust and most thorough questions that we could find. So the goal is that if you use one of these inventories, you will get a pretty darn good picture of where students were at within that standard and within that whole subject area of 7th grade life science or 8th grade. Okay, cool. So That's the basics of the inventories. If you know what PEs you want to assess, it's going to be much, much easier for you to go through and build your own inventory. So have a bunch of performance expectations written down first. Go into your site or go into your account and search for those PEs that you're looking for. So if it's MS, PS11, you can search for that and a bunch of content and clusters will pop up, and you can choose the questions and phenomena that you're looking for and add those in there. We recommend that you only use 1 or 2 questions from each of these. And I also strongly recommend that you look pretty critically at the questions that are on there. If you just include the question that says the 2 molecules that connect to each other in ammonia hydroxide are blank and blank, that is not a 3-dimensional question. You're going to want to aim a little bit higher than that if this is an inventory of student learning that's a summative assessment for the school year. And so all of the questions where we're actually analyzing sample models, where students are trying their own model, where they're writing CER statements, or where they're having to find evidence that supports a specific claim, those are the questions that you're looking for. And you'll see the tags next to each of those questions over on the left. So as I hover over the questions, this question is only a DCI question. Don't use this in your inventory. It's not going to help you here. It would be a great question as a do now or a warm up at the beginning of a unit on structure and properties of matter, but that's not what we're doing right now. But this question is tagged with elements of developing these models. It's tagged with PS1A, structure and properties of matter. It's tagged with scale, proportion, and quantity. So this is a good question for your inventory. So, and I think that this is actually in one of them for the middle school physical science, and that's why it's popping up here. Cool. You can also search for our other clusters. I just want to be, transparent that these inventories are beautiful and they're meant to be used right now. And specifically, we recommend that these be used at the end of the school year. So once you've finished all of the learning that's gone on, you want to give this assessment at the end of the school year in order for you to, figure out if students, where students are at and what we need to do. And just get a good inventory. We will have assessments that we're building over the summer. There will be diagnostic assessments for SEPs. Those are things that you'll give at the beginning of the school year. You could give assessments in the fall of an inventory of stuff that students were supposed to do last year, but I don't know that that's going to be the best use of your time. And these are rigorous assessments where students are applying knowledge they've learned to something they've never seen before. We recommend that these assessments be used primarily at the end of the school year. So just to be explicit about those 2 things. Okay, I do want to talk about the third option here, which is you get to talk to Erin and I, and we're pretty cool. So we would love to talk to you, and we nerd out about this all day long, full time. I know some of you may be part-time NGSS assessment nerds, but that's where we live. So if you'd like, Erin's going to drop a link to the calendar in the chat one more time because why not? And we'll please click on that link, make a meeting with us. What we'll do is we'll sit down with you. You can send us the PEs that you're looking to assess, the grade levels, and just kind of some additional information, how many questions you want, and blah, blah, blah. We would love to sit down and chat with you. We work with a lot of our districts to build benchmark assessments and other assessments in the same way. So if you want to kind of sample that, then please make a meeting with us. If you know the PEs you want to assess, we're going to have a good time. So come prepared, and we'd love to chat with you. So that's it for the options for the inventories. I'm going to kick it back to Erin so that she can wrap us up. But to be candid, we'll be sticking around for a little while. So we would love to chat with you if you do have questions about this. If you want us to demo parts of the reports of the site, just hang out and talk to us. But back to you, Erin.
Taking it. So again, the 3 options of how we see these inventories playing out in different contexts is 1, if you're short on time, don't maybe have a whole bunch of time to be with us because there's a lot of irons in the fire, whatever the metaphor you want to use, feel free to use the inventories. That's what we've created specifically with you in mind, those prepackaged inventories. Feel free to make your own using the tidbits that we've mentioned today about really making sure you know which PEs you'd like to assess and using those more rigorous multiple choice questions, or if you're ready to dive into some free response, to do that as well. And then option 3, because we can't say it enough, we'd love to meet with you. I did put the link into the calendar if you'd like to make a meeting with us for us to make an inventory with you. So here are your next steps, really broken down. So you're feeling excited, you're ready to do some inventories. we get off the call, what are your next steps? So the first thing seems pretty simple, but like log into InnerOrbit. If you are already an orbiter, you know how to do that, and you can join your account right away. If you are new to InnerOrbit, we would love to thank you for just being an awesome educator this school year, but then also attending our meeting today. And we have a special 2-month trial license for you. So if you are making a new account or if your trial has already expired, in 1 hour, so like set your timer, in 1 hour, you're going to get an email into your inbox with a special 2-month trial license to extend your account so you can start collecting data from your students between now and the end of the school year. So we'd really love to be able to gift you with that too. So check out your email in an hour for that link. Second, you're going to choose one of these 3 inventory options that we've mentioned so many times, but choose whichever one is best for you, your students, your team, your context, etc. And speaking of your team, is that if this is an opportunity you think for you to do these inventories and to bring your team together to really check out InnerOrbit, we'd love to offer you with a free pilot also for the rest of the school year as well, for your folks to really check out the site. We can demo pretty much everything we did today with your team as well, and you guys can intentionally evaluate if our site is a good fit for your NGSS assessment needs. So again, the calendar in the chat is really a jack of all trades. You can just use that. You want to make a pilot and a meeting with us as well, feel free to use the calendar in the chat to make a meeting with us, and we can chat with you about piloting with your team as well. And then last, if you just have a quick question and don't have time to hang out on the call, our email is inquiries@innerorbit.com. Feel free to email us anytime, and a member of our team will get back to you.